What if your body is not just carrying your soul? What if it's actually shaping your discipleship, how you believe, what you believe? What if it's shaping the way you think, your body? What if your spiritual formation isn't just happening apart from your body, but it's actually happening through it? The way you sleep, the way you eat, the way you work, the way you train, the way you rest, the way you suffer, the way you even recover. All of that is shaping you, it's forming you. And maybe it's not just a distraction or something separated from your spiritual life. Maybe it's the primary place that God is actually meeting you and talking to you, speaking to you, and sharing his affection and love for you. Maybe that's what spiritual formation looks like, that it is the embodied life. That's what we're going to talk about today. Hey, welcome back to the Rhythms and Roots podcast. This season is built around one central idea, that the life that you're currently living, the one you're living right now, is actually shaping you into the person that you're becoming. Now, that doesn't sound like overly crazy. That doesn't sound like I'm saying something that everybody's like going, wow, Donnie's saying something I've never heard before. We all know this. We all know this. I was just sharing this last week at my own church, sharing with them that I know that I need sleep. I know that I need to drink a certain amount of water per day. I know that I need to eat healthy. Knowing all these things will never, ever make you a healthier person. You have to live them out. They have to be an embodied practice. And so every day we're being shaped by something. Every day we are shaped by what we believe, and not just by what we believe, but how we live, our habits, our relationships, our work, our rest, our struggles, how we eat, what we drink, when we eat, when we drink, our rhythms, our practices, our discipline. Every single day, something is shaping you. And today's conversation may be one of the most theological conversations we've had. And I would even say this, probably the most important theological conversations we'll ever have. And it addresses something that many of us rarely stop and consider. What does it actually mean to be human? And you're like, oh, come on. This has been talked about for years. Yeah, I'm not going to give you anything during this episode that is going to be mind-boggling or mind-blowing. It might be just something that you sit back and you just go, I needed to be reminded of that. And I hope that's the case. For many of us, though, I want to specifically talk about this aspect of our lives, that faith can sometimes just be known as something that is just mental. Is something we think, it's something that we believe inside. It's mostly spiritual and mostly internal, yet the scriptures would present us as human beings to be people that are whole. Mind, body, soul, heart, relationships, work, calling, sleep, rest, worship. All of that is connected. And somewhere along the way, many Christians and people of other faiths too have learned to care very deeply about their spiritual life, but they have neglected their body. They've neglected the embodied life. And so we've talked in spiritual circles about stewardship financially, but we've talked less about stewardship physically. We've talked about surrender, but ignored what it actually meant to be exhausted and what we do with our physical exhaustion. We've talked about calling, but often neglected the human vessel that carries out that calling. And so today I'm joined by my really, really good friend, Manny Garcia. And Manny is an amazing young man. He joins me for a conversation today about embodied discipleship, formation, limits, stewardship, and what it actually means to follow God, follow Jesus as an entirely whole person in everything that we do. Manny serves as the General Superintendent of Iowa Yearly Meeting in the Evangelical Friends Movement, and he holds a doctorate in leadership, he has spent years and decades even in ministry and education, and is also a lifelong athlete. He grew up playing soccer and all kinds of sports in Hutchinson, Kansas. He's a KU basketball nut. He loves soccer. He loves FIFA. He loves Premier League and all the European leagues. He is in love with sports, but he is also in love with running. He loves running as a part of his way of connecting to God and actually staying physically healthy. And recently, he has jumped into the distance running world. And when I say that, the ultra distance running world. He's run marathons, half marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks. He's done all of it, and he's really fast. It's been fun to watch him over the years, and now he's moving into ultra marathons. In fact, this summer he's got a 50 miler and a 100 miler that he is tackling in October. So we're going to listen to some of Manny's ideas and thoughts about this idea of what it actually means to live an embodied faith through our activities, through our life, through everything that we do. Hey, Manny, welcome to the Rhythms and Roots podcast. So good to have you on, and good to see your face after just a couple of weeks ago, spending almost every day with you for long hours at a time at our national meetings. And
yeah,
it was so fun. So everybody, Manny is a superintendent with Iowa Yearly Meeting within the Evangelical Friends Movement. And I'm a superintendent here in Rocky Mountain Yearly Meeting, but kind of goes way back from there, as we just talked about. And can you believe you and I have known each other now almost 20 years?
Yeah, it's wild.
And it's crazy. I'm old and you're getting old.
I'm getting old. Yeah. Things like that just always remind me how old I'm getting. So,
man, I just met you. I mean, when I met you, you were considered one of the old college students then. But
I was. Yeah,
you were. I don't know how old you were when you went to Barclay College, but
yeah, I was in my mid-20s. So,
right. Yeah. Did your wife go to school
back
there
then,
too?
No, she moved to Haviland with me, obviously, but she didn't go to school.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as I just did a little intro on you a little bit, go into just a little bit of your history with athletics, wherever you want to go with that, like how you got into running, soccer, KU basketball, I don't know, whatever you want to share a little bit so people get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, soccer was, it's something that I grew up doing. My stepdad, that was his favorite sport. And so we signed up for like the YMCA Pee Wee days all the way through club ball, and played through middle school, high school, played a little in college. I actually went to college before Barclay at a junior college in Kansas and played for a season. And
what school is that?
It's Allen County Community College in the large metropolis of Iola, Kansas. So
nice.
Yeah. So that was an experience. I mean, it was maybe a prep trip to living in Haviland. It was a small community, much like Haviland, and kind of things revolved around the school. So always kind of had a love and a passion for soccer. And after my college days of playing were finally over, I did a little, they called it OTC or OTH, Over the Hill League in Des Moines. Played that for a few years, but really, we just talked about getting older, and at some point I needed a move in order to fit my pants. And so that's kind of where running came in. So started running kind of my last year at Barclay. I was really pretty determined to get in good shape and just kind of have a good final season at Barclay. And so that kind of started things. But after soccer was over, running was kind of the thing. So been doing that for about 20 years also. So
right.
And
what's interesting is a lot of people may not know where Barclay College is at or what it is, or in fact, I lived there for 8 years and I'm not sure where it's at either. You know?
Or what it is. So
no. But when you're there, obviously the diet in the town is not the best. Like it's good old, I mean, it is good. I would say it is the best. It tastes great. A lot of chicken fried steak, a lot of biscuits and gravy, a lot of hamburgers and cheeseburgers and pizza. And there is a huge lack of places that you could actually work out. So that's what happened to me. And I've shared this before, same exact thing. I blew up. Like I just started gaining weight so fast. I went to the doc and he's like, dude, you're a ticking time bomb. Like your blood pressure's up. You're 38 years old and you better figure this thing out, And so Ryan Kendall and Marshall Ballard and a few of those people, Audrey Ross and Jaden and then you as well. Like we we started a little sort of a running community, and then Adam Monahan as well, like him doing the Run for Missions got me into it. And I had, at that point, had never, ever heard of anybody being so stupid to run 100 miles, you know? And Adam, it's almost even more stupid because he would run from Wichita to Haviland, which if you know that distance, it's just a straight line. Like there might be a little curve once in a while, but it's not much. And it's all straight dirt roads for 100 miles and it's flat. And I thought, this is the dumbest thing ever. I mean, you know, but if you were going to get healthy,
that was kind of one of the only ways.
You had to find a way. Yeah. And which speaks into a lot of where we're going to go today. This idea that sometimes these spiritual communities, faith communities, churches, even in leadership circles, and when you're raised in the church, I know for me, as I was, there was a lot of talk about my faith, but there was zero talk about how my body integrated with that faith, you know, the embodiment of our faith, that there is a reality to that. And so I want to talk about that and just kind of get your perspective. First of all, a few things that are coming up for you. What do you have coming up? You just got done running, was it a 10K?
I did a half marathon. Yeah.
And you were speedy again.
Yeah, not as fast as I did last year, but I'm not training for that kind of run right now. So I was pleased with my time. I think I did just under hour 40. So
unbelievable. That's still fast.
And then I'm training. I have my first 100-mile run in October. And so on the way there, I've got I got a backyard ultra my goal is 50 miles for that. That's in August. And then in September, they call it an enduro. It's 10 hours on a 5K loop, and you just run it as many times as you can in 10 hours. So hoping to hit 50 on that one too. That'll be a little quicker than the backyard ultra to hit 50, but that's the goal right now. And hopefully that's enough to have the belief to be able to do 100 miles with some elevation over on the Mississippi River in Dubuque, Iowa. So,
yeah, is that where is it in Dubuque or where does it
it's
start?
In Dubuque at a state park called Mines of Spain. So it's, I mean, the course, it's 5 20-mile loops. And when you're done with the full 100, you will have gained and lost 14,000 feet of elevation. So it'll be something
significant. Yeah, it's significant. I think a lot of people think, oh man, if I want to get some elevation shift, I got to go to, the Sierras, I got to go to the Rocky Mountains, got to go at least to the Smoky Mountains, but you don't have to. Like I had a friend that just ran a 100-miler in Wisconsin near Milwaukee, and same thing. They changed the course to where the elevation, it's a lot of rolling hills. There's, you don't have like steep incline, but
well, a lot of people don't know geographically that area, and even kind of over by Dubuque, they call that the driftless area. And it's that when the glaciers came down, they didn't hit that area. And so where it flattened out all around it, that area still got a lot of, there's rock faces and rock climbing's big in that area. And there is elevation change there. So it's cool.
That's fun. It's going to be a challenge, but you'll be up for it. You'll do it. There's no doubt in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, talk about saying something's dumb. I was like, why am I doing this? It feels kind of dumb, but it's also, I'm excited for it. So.
Oh, you should be. You're going to do great at it. Like I just, one thing I've always known about you is how determined you are, even with your education. As I think about those days, back at Barclay College and kind of how your education history started, and you went straight to that, to a doctorate quick. Yeah. And I'm blown away by the amount of education that you went through in a short amount of time and how determined you were to get that done. And I think that speaks volumes about who you are as a dad and as a husband, but also as a leader in the church. You're a younger leader, but you're not real young, but you're a younger leader, especially for that role. Yeah. And a lot of that just happens to be based on your determination. And all that what I loved about you too, and all that education was watching how good you were at it too. It wasn't like, oh, he got a doctorate and barely passed. You were top of your class, man. And it was really, really fun to watch. You're brilliant in mind and in spirit. but you're also brilliant with your body and what you're doing with your body at your age. You're still moving the way that you are. And how old are you? 40?
Be 45 in October. Yeah.
Yeah. 10 years behind me. So yeah. So you got a lot to look forward to. This race is going to probably test you in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I think that you're going to find that the resilience you've had in all things is going to actually show up in this too. So, but yeah, as we begin here talking about, man, I lost my notes. I'll have to cut that out. This is a nice thing about it, but we are live. Some people are like, oh, what's he doing? I need to find my notes here. First question that I had for you. Yeah, there they are. Okay. Many people know you as a superintendent, a pastor, an educator, and a leader. Where did that journey begin for you? Where did your call to ministry in a sense come from?
Yeah. I think early in my faith journey, I came to the Lord later in life. I was in my early 20s, and it was pretty quick from like giving my life to Christ in the midst of this really beautiful small faith community in Hutchinson, Kansas, at Hutchinson Friends Church, to like immediately people that got to know me started calling out like, hey, I think God might be, calling you to something a little more intentional, a little more vocational. And I pushed back against it for a while. I was driving a forklift in a shampoo warehouse at the time. And I remember telling one of the guys there that's still a dear friend, he's like, I think God might be calling you into vocational ministry. And I'm like, nah, I don't think so. I said, I'll just be the best like volunteer I can be and drive this forklift until I'm like the foreman of this place. And that was kind of my, my plan. So, and then, thank God people kept speaking truth into my life. And finally I was like, okay, maybe there's something to this. And so I just started to explore that and, having conversations with people that I trust to be honest with me. And, I remember one specific conversation I had with a mutual friend of ours, Matt Macy. I drove to his house in Wichita. I was living in Hutch at the time. Drove to his house an hour for the whole purpose of asking him one question. I said, hey, I think God might be calling me into ministry. Can I do it without going to school? And he was like, well, you could, but why would you want to? And so that conversation was kind of the beginning of like, okay, if I'm really called to this and I'm going to respond in a way that I feel like honors the call, then I have to just go all in. And then that summer I was counseling at a camp, our camp in Kansas, Quaker Haven. And middle of a worship service, I just kind of felt impressed to kind of have my own little moment with God. And when I tell the story, I say, I don't think it was an audible voice of God. I don't think that I've ever heard like an audible voice, but something deep within my spirit just said, this is what I made you to do. So do it. Yeah. And so Barclay College was their recruiting at the time. And I remember going to another mutual friend, David Frazier. He was the recruiter. And I said, hey, I know you're here to recruit all these high school students, but you think I could go to Barclay College? Yeah, I mean, it was that awkward, and like I wasn't sure if am I too old? Am I disqualified? Like, what's the deal here? And so him and Megan were great, and they that was pre the free tuition scholarship, and so they wrote me a leadership scholarship right there on the spot, and I was still kind of reluctant. And so I called my wife and I said, hey, what do you think about next year? Let's get everything in order and kind of get ready to make a transition. And then next year we can move to Haviland and I'll start school. And that was kind of the beginning and end of the discussion. But by the time I got home, she had been pondering it and she said, hey, listen, if this is really what God's calling us to, I don't think we should wait because you'll talk yourself out of it.
Right.
And so she was like, I think we need to do it now. And so I called David and Megan because they'd written the scholarship for the following fall. And before I could even get a word out, he says, hey, listen, Megan and I were on the way to the next camp and we've been talking and we don't think you should wait. And so it was just kind of this affirmation and I was like, all right, I guess we're moving to Haviland. So that was, June. And by August we lived in Haviland and the rest is kind of history. I'd never really been a bad student, but I never really seen what was possible if I actually applied myself. Like school always came easy to me. So, AB honor roll throughout high school without really doing much homework, that kind of thing. But I was like, if this is really what I'm called to do, I need to really give it all that I have. And so I did. For 4 years, I pushed myself and learned how to be a good student rather than just somebody that could get by on, street smarts or whatever it was. So,
and I love that. I love that question that you asked Matt.
Yeah.
And I love his answer. Yeah. It's kind of like with physical activity and running, you could easily go and talk to like Adam Monahan, who's a really good mentor and friend of yours over the years, especially with ministry and running. And he would, if you went and told him, said, hey, I'm thinking about running 100 miles with you at the next Run for Missions. What do you think about that? I think I'm just going to do it without any training. He would look at you and say, you could probably do some of it, but why would you want to try to do all of it if you could have the opportunity to train? It's like kind of the same thing.
It's funny that you say that, because he was one of the first people I called when I decided to do this 100-miler. And that's he said, why are you doing this? Like,
right.
Why are you doing this?
There has to be a why, an answer to that. Yeah. I just love that answer, because I think that should be something we see anything in life. It's like, if you want to get married, you should probably train a little bit for that. You should prepare. You don't want to just say, hey, let's get married tomorrow. You should prepare, in everything we do, there should be a preparation. Yeah. Amazing. How did Barclay College and your educational journey, how did that all shape your understanding of leadership and discipleship? So you had people in your life. What did,
I think, for the first time in my life, I realized that I was being discipled. So that was big. Like, I didn't even know what this, I know it's a word that we use, but what does it mean?
I know.
And so, we had these, and every iteration of Barclay College is great in its own way, but I feel like the group of professors and mentors that were there on campus during my 4 years there were incredible. And, they didn't just do their job, but they really came alongside of the students. And, they connect with some better than others. But I got to be pretty close with a couple of people that to this day I consider to be mentors and people that I look up to and seek out when I have a challenge or celebrate with when I have a victory. And so that was a big piece. And then just responding to that, when somebody comes into your life and is that person of stability and of, their relationship with Christ is something that you look to and say, I want something like that. We still have a choice. Are we going to go in and do the things that are necessary early in our journey to see that kind of fruit, or, do we just go through the motions? And I would say I've ebbed and flowed in that throughout my life, but in that particular season, I tell people all the time, and when I tell my faith story, those 4 years, I probably grew more in a short period of time than maybe any other time in my life. And I think part of it is being a new Christian. I was still pretty new to the faith. I joke, I was in Bible class and, they'd say like, open up to Thessalonians, and everybody that grew up in church is like, they almost know exactly what page it's on. And I'm in the table of contents going, how many S's in Thessalonians? So, I mean,
some of those kids come out of like probably homeschool backgrounds that did Bible drills.
Exactly.
Like, all that stuff. Yeah. Man,
so it was a steep learning curve for me, but it was such a pivotal season of life for me. So I think that set the foundation for falling in love with education, but education that led me to a purpose and a goal, which was to honor the call that God placed in my life. So,
yeah. So purpose and goal. You got this 100-miler coming up. You have the 50-miler. And to ask Adam's question to you again, why?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, running is one of those things that it started as a, kind of a way to stay physically fit, right? I mean, I talked about it a few minutes ago, like my pants were getting tight. And so I needed to do something to, there's a picture of me that I point back to as kind of the moment. And, you talk about all the weight, you gain in the Midwest eating all of the comfort food and things like that. Well, then you add being a student, and I was also working part-time in vocational ministry. And it's a pretty sedentary lifestyle. Very much. I remember going to visit family, and we were taking this family picture, and I just looked at this person and I was like, is that what I look like? Like, I just looked unhappy. I was swollen everywhere. And so I was like, I gotta change my habits. And so that's how it started. But through my running journey, I've really found it as a way to connect with God and to be my most vulnerable self. I was listening to another podcast the other day, and they call the guys called their running journey their mobile meditation. And I was like, man, that's how I view it. Yeah. Like, it's hard for me to sit still, like in the corner of a room and get silent. I get, I don't have ADHD, I don't think, but I just get real antsy. But when I'm moving, it's easy for me to center. And so it's really become that for me. And it's a way to reflect. It's a way to pray. It's a way to sometimes just shut my mouth and observe creation. And so, yeah, it's become a really important part of who I am. And it's fun to see what the limits are.
Yeah.
Our bodies are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I was listening to a guy talk about how the human race is more diverse than any other created creature, because you have people that are world-class ballerinas, you have endurance athletes, you have linebackers. Like, there's all of these different like ways that we can train our bodies to do different kinds of things. And so I just think, man, it's how cool that God made us that way. And to press into that a little bit is, just like education is a way to honor the call, I think, doing something physical is a way to honor the image of God that we're created in. So
yeah, I love that. And that totally segues into kind of where we're going, what I kind of was hoping for in this podcast. Although my questions, if I get to any of them, that's fine. If I get to one of them, that's fine. If I get to all of them, that's fine. The goal is really to just hear your heart for ministry, for your call, for your family, and how your physical life is a part of the embodiment of that call. That in churches, like I said earlier in my monologue on this, is that we look at things and we look at our faith and we just say, we'll disciple well, but we don't teach how to live well. We disciple spiritually, but we don't teach physically how to allow that. I went to a pastor's retreat one time where, what's his name? Thompson, or the speaker was talking about how as our call to ministry is developed, if we don't take care of our physical body, we're never going to be able to live that call out. The physical body is a requirement to be able to speak, to preach, to lead, to be with people. And you know how it is, like with ministry, it can be grueling at times, it really can be physically, emotionally, and mentally. And if we don't have space to disconnect and find our relationship with God at a deeper level, we're never going to be good with the people. We have to fill our tank somehow. And, for me, it is running. So really, I don't want to talk necessarily specifically running in this podcast, but more about how God forms us through running and through our embodied lives. And so when scripture begins to tell the human story, like in Genesis, for instance, it begins with a physical reality. God, in the last podcast I just did, I talked briefly about the idea that when Adam had life breathed into him, it was the Spirit of God being breathed into a human body. It wasn't an idea. It wasn't, it wasn't a distant thought of a person. It was a real person breathing into lungs, breathing into bones and bloodstreams and atoms and all those things, right? So what is the genesis? Maybe what does your faith teach you about your body, about running, about physical exercise? What does it teach you personally?
Yeah. Well, I'll just start by saying some of those lessons have been really hard learned for me. I grew up pretty disembodied, I would say. I don't want to get too deep into, childhood trauma, but I grew up in a home that my stepdad was abusive, physically, emotionally. And so to survive, disembodiment was kind of the coping mechanism. And so,
wow.
Shielding your emotions, not feeling, what you're feeling, but just kind of putting on the mask and really being numb to a lot of what was happening. And I would say I lived my early relationship with Jesus that way. Like, it was almost like I superimposed this relational aspect that I had with my stepfather onto God and said, okay, well, I can't have feelings, but I better do the things that I need to do to earn, because I felt like I had to earn, favor or affection from my stepdad. Like when I performed well on the soccer field or when I got good grades, I got the attaboys, but they were few and far between. And in between, it was like, you're never going to be what I need you to be. And so whether, probably subconsciously, I just that's how I viewed God for the early part of my, and so, I think part of that early education too was like, I want to do well for God. And I think that I probably carried that through the master's, and even when I started the doctorate, I was still kind of living in that space. But really, it was in the doctoral program when part of the program was inner work to actually get inside of our hearts and kind of reflect on how our lived experience, our lived reality is impacting who we are and who we're becoming. And that was huge for me. I started talking to a spiritual director and therapists, and just kind of relearning how to feel emotion and how to process it and do it in a healthy way. And so, yeah, that led me to then, not just running, but the way I applied myself to my studies, the way I was a father, the way I was a husband. And my wife would tell you, like, wow, the 3 years that you spent doing that work, like, I wasn't a bad guy to before that, but just the level of openness, and like she would say, you opened yourself up to me in a way that I never knew was possible. Like, I felt safe to be vulnerable for the first time in my life. And so, and then you add that to your relationship with God, and all of a sudden it's not this God that you have to earn affection from, but rather you're responding to the truth that you're loved, that you're created for a divine purpose. And you might do a lot of the same things you were doing before, but the perspective from which you're doing them is so different. And so that's kind of how I got to the place that I am now. So I would that's been the biggest lesson for me, is that we're whole beings. We're not just a mind, we're not just a spirit, we're not just a body, but we're complete holistic beings. And when one of those areas of our life isn't given the space to be healthy, it affects the others, and I was physically unhealthy, I was emotionally unhealthy, and because of that I was spiritually unhealthy.
Yeah. It's crazy, because it's almost like you had all the ingredients, all the talent, all the giftedness that was, it was in you before the call, I was just reading a section out of Carol Dale Spencer's book, Holiness, the heart of the Quaker soul, and so it's kind of like a textbook for a lot of schools. And I don't even know if you read that, but had to read it. But she talks a lot. There's one section in there where she talks about the idea of holiness and perfection, and I just love it, because she quotes Robert Barclay and some of his beautiful thoughts on human perfection. Like, we can't ever get there, but there's this seed that is planted in every single person, and that seed has to somehow just come awake. It has to be brought into life. And when it starts to get brought into life, you start to understand really who you are. And so it's almost like, the best word for that is really to believe that Christ in you, the hope of all glory, starts to transform who you are. And you don't work for love, you work from love. You don't work for acceptance, you work because you are accepted. You don't strive. So in spirituality, in our faith, it's crazy, because as we talked about, just deciding one day to run 100-miler, you need the training, right? The good thing is the training just awakens what's available to you already. It just starts to like bring alive what is already inside of you. And that's what I said earlier about you. I love your determination. I love that you made a life out of something that many people couldn't build a life from. And I think, and as you've gotten older now, and your education has informed you of that, transformational leadership at Barclay, the master's program, is the same thing. It was more about soul work. It wasn't about how do we lead, or how do we finish 100-miler. It was more about how do we become the best version of ourselves in the beginning, and allow that to transform us moving forward. But why do you feel like, okay, so the embodiment, like we start thinking about embodiment, we start thinking about words like incarnation. And I just basically talked about that the perfection that's in us is not us, it's Jesus. It's the perfect Christ. It's the perfect work of God that's within us. Why do you think it's important? This might be a heavier question. I don't want to make this a seminary class, but at the same time, why does it matter that Jesus came in a body? And why does that help us with, what's your thoughts on that? Why is it important he became human?
I think it's the ultimate validation of our human bodies. Like God became flesh. He decided to be made of the same stuff that we're made of. And so I think it validates our humanity in a way that just saying that we're loved couldn't possibly. I mean, it's the physical act of love. But he didn't just put on skin. Like he lived in this body, he experienced the things that we experience, and then he died in a human body, and he was resurrected in a human body. And I think all of those things are experiences that ultimately we're going to relate to, even if we're not talking about physical death and resurrection, which, I pray someday that I get to experience that to its fullness. But until then, we have all of these moments in life, these ebbs and flows that are these little deaths and little resurrections. And the fact that we have a God, a Savior, a King that chose to take that journey, it validates everything that we will experience as humans.
Yeah. One of my last guests that I had, he just finished the Cocodona 250, and he talks in there a lot about how understanding the incarnational aspects of who Jesus was, his suffering and what he actually went through so that we would have life. He said always gives him the opportunity to look at what he's doing as he's running and go, if he suffered, I can suffer. If he went one more mile, I can go one more mile, and it's part of this idea. It gives us hope in our physical bodies that we can accomplish so much more when we actually align that up with the work of Christ and what he did. Yeah.
Right. And I would say for people that aren't endurance athletes or people that push themselves like that physically, like don't let that get lost on you. Like it's not just about running. It's not just about doing, physically hard things, but each of us faces trials in our life, and we have a Savior that has experienced suffering in various ways. And so, he knows us intimately because he's been in our shoes. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think most people separate the body and the soul? Why do we say, okay, this is prayer, this is eating, this is biblical reading, and this is something, you know what I mean? Like we kind of categorize them and separate them. Why do you feel like that?
I mean, I don't want to categorize and paint with broad strokes, but I think a lot of it has to do with shame. I think that, we feel shame in our bodies. And so it's easier to just compartmentalize. And, my spiritual life is spiritual. It's ethereal. My academic life is just that. It's in my mind. But, my body, I need to keep that separate because that's where I experience temptation. That's where I experience, gluttony and all of these other things. And so, let's circumcise our bodies from our spirituality. It's for me, it was a coping mechanism. That's I do bad things with my body, and so it must be bad. So
right. And you and I share a very similar story where what we did early with our bodies was not a good thing, and somehow we live in that shame. In fact, the author I was thinking about earlier was Kurt Thompson, who wrote the book The Soul of Shame, and he talks a lot about the neuroscience behind how we deal with shame. And I love that. I love that idea that our bodies somehow connect us to what we're often most ashamed about. We look in the mirror and we're ashamed. Right. I'd love to be the guy that takes James' passage when he says, you're like the one who looks in a mirror and walks away and immediately forgets who he is or what he saw. And I'm like, I'd like to immediately forget what I am and what I saw, because I think the body does remind us of how we fail.
Yeah,
I ate poorly.
And again,
I talked about it on Sunday. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, at the risk of painting with broad strokes again, I think pastors, people in ministry, maybe struggle with that more than the general population because we don't have that kind of intimate relationship to be able to process those things. And we're in an endemic of pastoral failure right now. And I think it has a lot to do with what we're talking about right now, that, that we have this very academic idea of spirituality and discipleship, but we've disembodied it. And so it's all, you can almost turn that part of your brain off and go do the thing that you feel is going to numb your pain or make you feel good or whatever. And then you go back and preach a sermon on discipleship 2 days later or something like this. And, we're missing a really big piece of formation when we don't include our physical bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. God did not create souls and then abstractly just say, maybe I'll put a body on that now, I'll put the soul. He created us as whole beings, spiritual, physical, and emotional, that we are one body, one soul, one mind, one spirit that is connected to one Father and one God and one Savior, right? Where there's a mystery behind that. So even me just saying that, I'm like, okay, how does that all work? I don't know. I don't really know, but perhaps one of the most important spiritual questions we can ask isn't how is my soul doing, but is how is my whole life doing, right?
Yeah.
What am I doing right now to shape who I'm becoming? And that's kind of the question for this series that I'm doing right now in the Rhythms and Roots podcast, is like the person that you are right now, the person that you are living out to be today is the person you're shaping yourself to become. And, that's a tough one, because honestly, I feel like how I live my physical body is actually a huge part of how I worship God.
Sure.
How I eat should be directly related to how I understand and know God. And so when we begin to do these physical movements, we can actually take that and say, okay, what am I doing to glorify God in my body and my mind and my spirit? Because God didn't send Jesus to redeem part of us, right? Yeah. He came to redeem all of us and every portion of us and who we are. Yeah. How do habits? Okay, we belong to the Friends Church. We belong to a denomination that is really big on spiritual disciplines. The holiness movement was big on the spiritual disciplines. One of our modern authors today, Richard Foster, wrote Celebration of Discipline. I don't love the word discipline. I don't know about you, but
it's not my favorite.
No. But how do disciplines or rhythms shape you personally? And did you have to go through like developing a rule of life when you were in did that help you?
A little bit. I mean, it's definitely been altered in different seasons. I would say I have a rule of life now, but it's not like this like rigid thing that's like
planned
put down
out
on paper. Yeah. It's more of like a liturgy of living that I just, it's up here, and I have rhythms that I go through. But, I think the deepest learning I ever did on this, I was reading a book by James K.A. Smith. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. He wrote a book called You Are What You Love, The Spiritual Power of Habit. And the thesis of the book is this very simple sentence: the things that we do things to us. And so like I have a whole, like when I was writing my doctoral dissertation, like I have a whole chapter that starts with just the seed of that sentence, because it's so profound. And I take it to the idea that nothing we do is benign. Like we have these set of practices that help us grow and become the people that God created us to be, but not doing them also has an effect. Not doing something to grow spiritually has the reverse effect. We're not just staying stagnant, we're actually growing farther from the image that we were created to be. And so there's no benign decision or action in our life. Everything that we do has a consequence. It has an impact on who we're becoming, which, I mean, that's what your whole series is about. It's, the things that help us become who we're becoming. And unfortunately, we're always becoming. We're always becoming something, either through action or inaction. And so that was a pretty profound realization in my spiritual journey. And so I was like, well, I want to do the things that I need to do to become the best version of myself, who God created me to be. And, I'm human. And so there's been seasons where I've done that better than others, but I'm more aware of it than I've ever been, that deciding to, sleep in instead of run, or deciding to, binge that show instead of, taking a few minutes to reflect on my day, or to journal, or to pray, or something like, I think our flesh always seeks out the path of least resistance, and so we have to be mindful. We have to be mindful of the decisions that we're making.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's like, spiritual life, physical life, they both end the same based on our choices, right? Mm-hmm. So for instance, like I always tell people, if I spend 30 minutes in the Word in the morning and I read and I pray, I never have ever, not once, ever said, man, I really wasted 45 minutes to an hour of my time today.
Right.
I have never once, even yesterday, one of the hardest runs that I've been on, and it wasn't a hard run. It was just under 8 miles, but something's going on in my body where my gut just is not doing well, and I can't get breath. So it's just been one of those things, and I'm out running, and I'm just going. I'm looking at my heart rate. My heart rate was 130, and I couldn't breathe, and I was frustrated.
Yeah.
But I pushed through and I just kept going. And all of a sudden I started feeling better. By the end of the run, I was running normally and it felt good, and I got home and I thought I could have easily quit,
Yeah.
But because I was able to push through, it ended up being something I look back on and go, nice, good work,
Yeah.
But the spiritual life is no different. There are times,
exactly.
When you were mentioning earlier, just in your initial statements with that question, there are days when you're going to sleep in and you're going to, hopefully you look at that and say, that was the best thing for me,
Right.
And then there's days where you get up and you're like, I want to sleep in, but I'm going to run. And that's the best thing for you. You don't ever, I never leave and go on a run and come back and go, that was stupid.
Right.
It always makes me feel well and in amazing ways. So
but that's another thing, like listen to our bodies, right? Like, which again, you have to be a holistic person to learn how to do that. But, it's not about following the desires of our flesh, but really the needs of our holistic person. Like sometimes you do need that extra hour of sleep. Sometimes you do need that third slice of pizza or whatever. Like, but when it becomes the habit, then we're indulging. And so that we have to discern, providing a need versus indulging. And there's a fine line, and I've crossed it many times in my life.
Always. Yeah. If we could sin in our physical bodies that way, I've sinned a lot, but thank goodness there is a voice that speaks to us in that tells us, you probably shouldn't have 3 cookies. One is okay.
Yeah.
I've never drank no, I know. I've never drank, that extra cup of coffee and said that was dumb. And I know you feel the same.
Agreed. Yeah.
In fact, I got my little Corvus coffee just to let you know. I brought it today.
This is my my Sweet Bloom.
Nice. Love it. Yeah. Why do ordinary things like for you, like sleep and work and exercise, eating, rest, why does it matter to you spiritually and not just physically? Connect those for me in your life. Like, why does that matter? And do you, to add into that a little bit, you just ran this half marathon. You're going to be embarking on a 50 and then 100. What are you hoping for, not just physically in that, but spiritually? So maybe combine those a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, so the first part of the question, again, it's the idea that we're holistic people. And when they say comparison is the thief of joy, but I think reflection might be one of the ways that we access real joy. So, it's not comparing ourselves to others or even to a better season in our lives, but reflecting on what could I have learned from that season. And I just know when I was not physically healthy, the other parts of me suffered.
Man,
I wasn't as good of a leader. I wasn't as good of a Christ follower. I wasn't as good of a father or husband. It affected my temper. It affected my emotions. It affected my energy levels. And so, and they all are interdependent on the other. If I'm not investing in my spiritual life, the other aspects, my runs aren't as good. My sleep is worse. I can't focus. And so it's not about the physical elevates the other, but they all are interconnected. They all impact the other. And so I'm at my best holistically when I'm taking care of all of those pieces.
Yeah. Do you feel like you are able to handle stress differently when you're when you're in moving and when you're exercising? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, as you know, experientially in this role, sometimes the stress can get pretty high. And really, one of my go-tos is I just need to go on a run. And it really doesn't have as much to do with like, it's not escapism. It's a way for me to focus.
Right.
It's a way for me to give the things that are outside of my control to God and to really process in a way that's healthy. I'm more pastoral when I'm running. Because when I'm just sitting here at my desk, I'm very reactionary. And I can get offended easily, and I can, have knee-jerk statements that aren't very kind. But if I have a chance to just process, I can come at it and be like, okay, I can kind of see where this person's coming from, and maybe they just need to be heard. And I love them. And sometimes it's easy to forget that we love them when we're in the moment, but to go away for a minute and and it doesn't have to be running. For some people, it doesn't require the movement. Like I said, mine is mobile meditation, but some people can do that.
I love that.
Go into the other room and count to 10 or whatever. But for me, it's running, and that's how I tap into that, connecting in a deeper way to whatever I'm experiencing. I talked about having to relearn how to feel my emotions, and when I'm running, it's one of the ways I can't tell you the number of times I've been on a run and I'm just weeping. Or there's other times where like I probably look like an idiot, but I'm just smiling ear to ear, and people are like, "What's wrong with that guy?" But it's a very vulnerable space for me.
Yeah, me too. I've been discipling a few guys on Monday nights. They're young. They're in their 20s. It's my son and his buddies, and they're all going deeper in their faith right now. They're going to school or working, and they have a desire to maybe possibly lead in the church someday. And so I'm kind of discipling him for that. And last night we were talking about, what is it that when we're engaged in it causes you to think about God? And I told him, whatever that is, like if you're engaged in that one thing that makes you have conversations about God, even doubting conversations or frustrating conversations or questions that affirm your faith and give God praise, whatever it is. I said, if you're talking to God while you're doing that, you need to do that often. And one of them looked at me and goes, well, yeah, I love my car. And he said, I've often said, like, I wouldn't have this car if God didn't bless me with the job that he's given me and the talent I've getting. He's like, and I said, then give God glory back. He gave you a car. I said, what do you want to do with it? And he goes, gosh, we got these amazing mountain roads, that wind around. And it's a Volkswagen GTI, and it's kind of souped up, and he's 21-year-old. And he's like, I'm going to do that. And I said, yeah, take a Sabbath. And it's okay for you to take a Sabbath and spend a tank of gas on like whatever it is that you're driving through the mountains. And if that causes you to think and thank God for what he's given you in your life, go drive your car. Go drive it. That's okay. For me, it's running. One of them said it was journaling. My son said now it's beginning to be working out, like literally just going into the gym and putting headphones on and listening to worship music and going from machine to machine and doing some cardio. And he's like, I'm enjoying that. Yeah. It's like, and when we do that, there's no expectations.
Right.
When you and I are running, we might put expectations on the run or whatever it is, but there's no outside expectations for us. Nobody's telling you, hey, Manny, you need to plant some churches in Iowa. Donnie, you should stop closing churches in Colorado. And like, there's a lot of pressure with that stuff, and ultimately what that is what you said is so true about it makes you a better pastor, makes you a better leader, makes you the person that you want to become. And one of the notes I wrote down for this is that our movement or our exercise or the things that we do that cause us to flourish and think about God, those are not obstacles to our discipleship. They're actually the best classroom, the best classroom is probably what we're doing where we're flourishing and talking about God.
Yeah.
So, all right. I don't know. Any other thoughts on that for you? Any things that you've been thinking about of what's on your heart and mind?
I connect, that idea, but it's also the idea of overcoming. There's something about doing hard things that deeply connect us to God. And I think, I was thinking back to Genesis this morning, knowing that we were going to have this podcast. I was actually on a run. I was like, all right, what kind of insights do you have for me today, God? And I don't know, I was reflecting on the idea of, work becoming this thing that was by the sweat of our brow and thistles, but work existed before that. It wasn't the work that was the result of the fall. It was that it got harder and it got painful. But there's something in doing hard things that connects us with the way we're created.
Mm.
And we live in such a culture now where it's pretty easy to not do hard things. And so I think things like running or working on a car, I would be the worst at that, but I'm guessing there's some difficult things that come with that. My wife loves to work in the flower beds. That's her way of connecting with God. And for me, it's like, well, that's just a chore. And she gives me a hard time for running. She's gotten better. She now will ask me how my run was, and I'm glad that you had a good time or whatever. But she's one of those people that are like, what in the world are you running all these miles for? But it's this idea of we're doing something that we're created to do. We don't have to. Some of us still do, but most of us don't have to work the field for our meals. And so, but there's something in us, in our created order, that doing hard things connects us with how we're wired. And so, and I think it's worship.
Right.
I know it's worship because I've experienced it.
Yeah. And I think about, the Genesis account, it was before the fall that he put Adam in the garden to work it.
Yes.
And it was a pleasure thing for him. It wasn't, work was not a problem. Work was actually the enjoyment of working and getting his hands dirty with the only other person in the room, and that was God, God the Father. And actually, as we know, the Trinity, Jesus was there too. The Holy Spirit was there, the whole thing. But in leadership terms, we often think, oh man, if I can just do more, if I can work more hours, if I can do more visits, if I can do more speaking engagements, go to more churches, whatever it is, as leaders, I think we often are led into this lie that, if we work towards being completely exhausted, then somehow we're more faithful. Being exhausted physically and running might be a good thing. But even you and I know that in training, if you just keep doing more miles and more miles, you're just going to break down your body more. In fact, I just watched a podcast where the guy said, do you really need to run 75 to 100 miles to learn how to do an ultra? And he said, I don't think so. He said, I ran anywhere from 38 to 45 miles a week in my training just to run an ultra, and I ran it better. And it's more about this idea of like less miles, but more time on your feet, long runs, right? Same type of thing. And I think the principle's true with leadership. It's true with physical training as well. Like more is not more. More is often going to destroy our heart and our mind and our body in a way. Do you take a Sabbath, a regular Sabbath? Do you try?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every Monday.
Yeah. What is that? What has that taught you most?
Well, in my flesh, it's taught me that I'm not all that important. I mean,
wow.
the world keeps spinning, things keep getting done. I'm not the cog in the wheel that keeps the machine running, which, I mean, we know that, right? But sometimes it feels pretty good to feel like we're, important to what's happening. And in some ways we are, but we're no more or less important than anyone else, especially, in our stream, the stream that we swim in as friends. Like, it's a very egalitarian type of approach to ministry. And, we don't have these elevated, like, chosen ones, but it's the community as a whole that is the most clear reflection of Christ. It's when we're all together doing what we're called to do. And so it teaches me that I'm just one of many, and that, but it also teaches me, I learned in another book that I was reading several years ago, the idea that the American culture has taught us to rest from our work. It's work, 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 vacation. And the author he said, I would argue with you that we're actually created to work from our rest. And so, it's not, my Sabbath is not rest from the previous 6 days. It's preparation for the next 6 days.
Yeah.
And what a mindset shift that was. And so that's made a huge difference. But it's also taught me that it's okay to enjoy the things that God has created me to enjoy. It's taught me that it's okay to stop. it's taught me moderation and boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Because I used to take my Sabbath, but like, if somebody called, well, I'm going to take that call because they might need something. And now I'm just like, you know what? If it can't wait till tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
you'll call someone else. And if it
Right.
can, then I'll talk to you tomorrow. And
Yeah.
so, and that was, those mentors that we were talking about earlier. I actually learned that the hard way because I used to get super frustrated when I would call one of those people and he wouldn't take my call.
And you're like, I know you have your phone in your hand because you always have your phone in your hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But now, all these years later, and I'm in a very similar role to what he was when that was happening to me. I'm like, oh, actually, he was discipling me without even,
Right.
needing to say anything. He was just modeling for me a healthy rhythm of life and healthy boundaries. And so, yeah, I mean, I try to have a pretty active and alive relationship with Jesus, but without that Sabbath, when I used to teach it to my youth group kids, I said I had this Hot Wheel track when I was a kid, and it had this car wash with it like a motor in it. And
love it.
The car would get around to the car wash, and then it would, it speed it up. And I was like, that's what Sabbath is. It's like, we need rest. We were not created to go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have to get to the point where we catch our breath, we get our bearings about us.
Yeah.
We fill our cup because you can't pour from an empty cup. So.
Right. Yeah. And I think that goes against the culture, that goes against everything. You're just completely, even in running, it's like, where do you take your rests? They're often after your long run day or after a double long run day where you do back-to-backs when you're training for an ultra, and you got to take your time off and rest. And that's true. Your body does need to rest from the strain that you put on it in the last 2 days or whatever. But man, our souls are different. Our souls are very, very different in that. Like we need to rest as a way of preparation. We need to rest as a way of infilling and strength building before we go out. Like that is our strength training is Sabbath. It's rest.
Yeah.
I love how you said that about your Sabbath really just almost reveals your limitations, and why do you think limits, not necessarily failures, might be one of the greatest gifts for you? Because we are limited, right? As leaders, it's really hard because I can't make this stuff happen. I have to try to use leadership techniques and the Spirit of God within me to help things be moved along. But why are limits not failures, but maybe a gift to you?
Yeah. Well, in my experience, they've taught me to stop being such a people pleaser early in my ministry. And I remember vividly, like I was having a conversation with one of my elders, like the first church that I was like senior pastor at. And I was kind of being a crybaby, but I was just kind of complaining about, man, I feel like I just can't get my bearings about me, and everybody wants to, I like herding cats, and I don't know. I was complaining about a lot of stuff, and this sweet woman, she just goes, "Who are you trying to please?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, it seems like everyone." And she just goes, "Well, that might be your problem." And so, learning that I can't please everyone, you can't please all people all the time. That's the old saying, right? But also, that's not my job. That's not my call. My call is not to please the people that I'm serving or the people that I'm working with. But again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, it's to honor the call.
Yeah.
To live and work and lead in such a way that it honors the call that God has placed on my life, to be a pastor, to be a leader. And that there are limitations to that. None of us
we don't qualify.
No, exactly. So,
yeah.
But I think it also creates space for other people to step into their giftedness. And when we're the ones trying to do it all, it almost, it pushes other people out. And and unfortunately, I've seen it in our stream as friends. We celebrate and elevate tradition to the point where it doesn't create space for new ideas and new people and new energy. And it's broken my heart, but I've seen so many gifted people go to different streams because there's space for them there. Yeah. And so, and pretty soon we're going to have a we're going to have a reckoning, because we don't have any choice but to face our limitations. We can't keep doing what we're doing. We're running out of people and resources.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You know, I said this on Sunday in my message, or just tail end of the Sermon on the Mount. And I said, Jesus didn't say these things in the Sermon on the Mount, which are really difficult. They sound very poetic in many ways, but, you know, when he's speaking to them and sharing these insights about anger and prayer and loving your enemies and all these things, they almost sound really nice until you start realizing that they're intended to change you, it's not an idea. It's meant to change you. And I told our church on Sunday, I said, look, Jesus didn't say these things to make you more impressive. You know, he didn't come to this earth to lead in such a way to make us better people so that people look at us and go, wow, he's amazing, or she's amazing. He didn't create impressive people. He came to create people that would follow him and be disciplined and faithful, you know, and not in a perfect way, but in a way that says, I'm bringing my limitations, you know, and I'm going to put them on the table, and I'm going to transform those. You know, you were talking about the people that you lead. You know, as I think about leadership, I think it's like all those people are like Crayolas. You know, God's given you a picture to create, but you're only one color as a leader. The goal is how do I express vision enough to where they see the picture that I want to create, that I'm intending to create, and how do I use their giftedness or their individual color palette to be able to create this image? Because you can't, otherwise nobody likes a monochrome image that has no contrast. You know, it's one color, you know, it's a terrible picture, you know?
Right.
But what makes it a great picture is that there's unity and there's individualism and there's all of that comes together into one picture to create something that's amazing. So the world will teach us to overcome our limits. I feel like God teaches us, the gospel teaches us to use our limits to express the gospel and to share it. But next section here that I kind of wanted to get to was, you know, how do we talk about health without turning it into a spiritual idol? You know, how do we talk about, you know, because people would look at me and say, okay, Donnie's worshiping running. Who?
Yeah.
It's a tough line for me sometimes. I know there's other believers too that say, I don't have time to run an ultra because there's a danger in it becoming a god to me, you know?
Sure.
How do we talk about health without turning it into, you know, an idol? Maybe for you, what does that look like for you? Do you struggle with it?
I do a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I get a lot of those same conversations, you know, because I mean, especially right now in this season, like it's hours and hours of my life.
It is. Yeah.
You know, it's not a 30-minute 5K. It's, you know, 3 hours, 4 hours out running. And if I'm driving somewhere to get there, you know, we're talking about half a day. And so, you know, from the outside looking in, it can look like, man, you're making an idol out of this, or you're orienting your life around this thing. But I think we have to be careful. Just like we don't want to disembody our physical bodies from our formation, we also can't disconnect the physical thing we're doing, whether it be running, with the holistic idea of discipleship. We don't want to take the physical and not talk about the other parts because maybe they're over talked about, but how do we connect them to the whole? And so again, I get really honest when I talk to people about my running, and I say, you know, I pray while I'm running. I meditate while I'm running. Sometimes I just run and do nothing but listen to the Spirit. You know, I connect with creation. You know, there's, in Discipling for Development, D4D, they talk about the 4 relationships, and those 4 relationships are never more real to me than when I'm running. You know, my relationship with God, with myself, with other people, and with creation. Those 4 relationships are so tangible to me when I'm out on the, especially if there, you know, there's other runners and bikers and things like that out there. Like, you know, it's a community that you're engaged with without ever having to have a conversation, and you're engaged with creation. You know, I was on a run the other night, and I mean, I think I saw, you know, 6 or 8 different kinds of animals that, you know, you don't just see every day when you're just, you know, just living in town and not getting outside of your normal rhythm. So, but yeah, just like we don't want to disembody our physical bodies from discipleship, we also don't want to take that one piece and say this, just focus on this.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Do you have to get permission a little bit? And have you had to kind of sell that to your wife? And
she's been very supportive, especially she knows that the 100-mile is something that, it's one of those kind of bucket list items for me. And people have asked me, will you do another one? And I keep saying, probably not. I don't know. It doesn't seem like something I want to do over and over again. And maybe after I do it, I'll change my mind. But it's just one of those things that I want to see if I'm capable. And I'm really enjoying the journey of building my body to be able to do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my mind. And, it's not just a body thing. There's a lot of mental things that go with running for 24 hours and running in the dark and running by yourself. And so, but, running teaches me a lot about myself. And so I'm looking forward to the things I learn over these next few months about who I am and who God's created me to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when I think about those 4 things you were sharing, when people say, oh, you worship creation. No, I don't worship creation. What I do worship is the one who created what I see that makes me marvel, when I'm out running and you see those different animals. I remember one time in Kansas, I was running and I was just 1 mile, 1 mile straight east of Denny Ross's place. And I started in Haviland and I kind of went 1 mile north and then I went 1 mile to the east and then I went 1 mile to the highway and then 1 mile across and then 1 mile, so that was one of my routes. I did a rectangle that day, but I was on that 1 mile east of, or west of, east of Denny Ross's house. And there was a badger and you don't want to run into a badger.
No.
Like there's not a ton of dangerous animals in Kansas, but there's enough.
Yeah.
You run into a badger and she was running right down the ditch with me. And as soon as I got back, I called Denny and I was like, you got badgers? He goes, did you run out there? And I said, yeah. He goes, you should never run by there again. He said, they will chew your leg off.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've gotten stalked by a fox on a run before.
Yeah. And some of those things,
I've seen bobcats and things like that.
It makes you realize how small you are, when you're out there. And if you do run in the middle of the night, which I have, there's something almost eerie about it and scary. And especially when you're in the mountains, and you got to have a lot of faith. There's a lot of prayer time going in that moment because fear will never make me pray more than anything else. Like fear makes me pray more than anything else. When I'm scared, I'm praying. And sometimes just running and those type of things really causes us to think about who's behind all this, who's behind the ground underneath my feet, who's behind the heart that is beating in my chest that has no reason to beat. Like, why is that thing just beating? Why am I breathing? I'm not connected to anything. But when you kind of get into just a little bit of a bigger theological vision on this, why does, this is a big question, why does the resurrection of Jesus actually, why does it matter to our bodies, not just to our souls? And take your time to answer that. That's a big one, but why does Jesus coming out of the grave somehow allow us to see our physical bodies differently in a way?
For me, I connect it back to a few moments ago when, why do we disembody so often? It's shame. And I think the resurrection is the reality that redemption is possible.
Yeah.
That none of us are too far gone, that even death is not enough for God to overcome. And so, how can, this decision or this thing that I chose to use my body for in a specific season, it's not irredeemable. And God does desire to make it new and to wipe the slate clean. And he's done that through the blood of Jesus Christ. And so that's my very not much time to process that question answer. But,
Yeah, but it, and for me too, I feel the same. I feel like it helps me understand that I can overcome things, right?
Yeah.
If the same spirit that was in Jesus to overcome death is inside of me, which we do believe that, right? It's not an if.
Yep.
I believe it because I feel it and I know it.
Yeah.
The same power that was in him to overcome the grave is the same power that's in me. If I believe that, then 100 miles sounds impossible without that. But it sounds really probable if I actually focus on that and I use that same spirit and then use that time as a time to really connect to the Spirit of God that's within me in those moments, so important.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah. Christianity does not end with leaving the body behind. It ends with the redemption of all things. I love the word that you used there. Like it helps us to redeem everything. The resurrection helps us to redeem the things we couldn't redeem on our own. What's God teaching you like in this season right now? What are you learning through life in general, running, leadership, whatever it is? What's God saying to you right now, Manny?
Yeah, I mean, in this season of life, we're navigating some difficult conversations from a ministry standpoint. There's so many parallels to the training block that I'm in with, getting ready. I mean, it's hard work, and there's been more days in the last 6 weeks that I haven't wanted to run because I know it's going to be hard than maybe the last year, right? I mean, I'm putting more time on my feet. I'm doing different kinds of runs, and sometimes I just don't want to do it. And I think, there's days where I don't want to I don't want to open my email. I don't want to check my voicemail because there's hard conversations on the other side of it. But just like you said, there's hardly ever a time where you go on a run and say, man, I wish I hadn't done that. And there's never a time where you've taken the time to spend time in the Word or praying and you're like, man, I really wasted that. And so, on the other side of pressing in to the difficulty is that purpose. It's that joy. And I don't know, the contrast makes those times of rest or of joy or of celebration that much more rich.
Yeah.
And so, I have a rest day tomorrow, and as soon as I got done with my run today, I was like, oh yeah, tomorrow's a rest, and it's going to be a really good day.
Right.
But
right.
And I think, almost always after a rest day, I really look forward to that next run. And so, it kind of just, there's probably a lot to learn about Sabbath there, right?
Right. And coming off the heels of somebody for you that had a streak going. Tell us about that, like the running streak. And why is it okay that you're not doing that now?
It wasn't good for me. Physically, I was breaking my body down, and I had an injury, and so I probably went longer than I should have because I was towards the end of the calendar year, and I was like, well, I'll just get to the end of the year, and then I had to take several weeks to heal, and I'm sure you've had seasons like that, and there's lots of stuff that comes with that. You have to retrain your fitness, and you have to, there's disappointment that comes because you feel like you should be able to do this pace and you can't because, and again, so many parallels to our spiritual life, and not that we won't drop the ball because we will.
Yeah.
And, hear that there are going to be times where we fail. There's going to be times where we fall short. There's going to be times where, the rest maybe is longer than we need it to be, or the one day that we needed to sleep in turns to 6 or 8 days where we just, the lethargy kicks in or whatever. But again, going back, the power that's in Christ is in me. That all of that is redeemable. There's grace abounds. His mercies are new every morning. These are not just colloquialisms to make us feel good. It's truth.
Yeah, it is truth.
And so I think as long as we have our eyes fixed on Jesus, like my goal for this ultra is to finish in 24 hours, and all of my training is pointing me that direction. My goal in my spiritual life is to be more like Jesus today than I was yesterday, and as long as I keep that as the focus, progress will be made. I'll continue to grow.
Yeah. What encouragement might you give people that are listening right now? Because I have some people that I know for a fact are listening, and they're listening to this for this reason. I got to get healthier physically. Some of those people are pastors. They are leaders. They are people that are listening to this going, Okay, maybe there's something behind this. What encouragement to give those leaders that are feeling exhausted, maybe shameful of how their physical body is right now, struggling with work and ministry and the demands of that? What encouragement would you give those men and women out there right now?
Yeah. Well, I think to start, wherever you are right now is fine. Not that it's not good, especially if you feel the need to be somewhere different, but you can only start from where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn. You know, I was overweight, I was tired, I was, short-tempered, and I had friends like Adam, and I'm like, "Well, I want to run a marathon next week." You know? I mean, absurd, but deep inside of me, I'm like, this is unhealthy, that's healthy.
Yeah.
And so I just want to be that. But, we have to start where we are. And so, you're probably, if you're in a place where your physical fitness isn't where you want it to be, probably aren't going to run a 5K tomorrow. But,
Yeah.
could you walk a mile? Could you,
Yeah.
could you cut out sugar? Could you, not have 3 cookies, maybe just have 2? Like, I mean, it's, you have to start somewhere.
Right.
And it's also real.
And in our spiritual lives, that's exactly the same true, right? We don't clean ourselves up to come to God.
Right.
In fact, he just says, "No, I'll gladly take you the way you are. Yep. I accept you the way you are." If we could accept ourselves as we are, with the intention and the desire of knowing that we're going to be transformed and changed in this process of training spiritually, physically, and emotionally, we'll see that change come. Yeah. What is becoming whole, or, what does whole look like to you? What does becoming whole look like for you right now?
Yeah, I think, and I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm still learning about myself. I wasn't in that doctoral program all that many years ago where I was kind of forced to hold up the mirror and start unpacking some of my stuff. And there's times where, something will pop up and I'm like, oh, I haven't dealt with that yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm still on the journey. None of us have arrived. You're 10 years ahead of me, and I think you would say the same thing, right? I mean, there's things that I continue to learn about myself and about God and about the relationship that, I didn't know previously. And so I think it gets dangerous when we get to the point where we're like, all right, I think I'm done. And so, and again, parallel that to running or whatever else your thing is, right? I mean,
Right.
there's always somebody farther along, and there's always somebody a little bit behind you. And, if you can look to that person down the trail and say, man, if I could just get a little wisdom from them and have them kind of walk alongside of me. And then if I can share that with the person that's a little bit behind me, I mean, that's the sweet spot. That's what we're created for.
Yeah, I know.
For community.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, was it yesterday or the day before you posted on your TikTok? I see a lot of stuff on your TikTok, Manny Runs. You posted a picture. As I was looking at it, I was like, man, Iowa looks pretty good. And it was a picture on your porch with your feet kicked up, and you said, all you said was, man, the evenings in Iowa, or something to that effect. Yeah. And I was with you. The minute I looked at it, I was like, that looks really awesome. Like your porch.
Yeah.
And what you're building in Iowa with your little run club that you're doing. You told me when you were here too, that everything that you're doing with running and spirituality and your faith and your leadership is a lot of that is starting right there. You're going to run this 100. And I remember you telling me when you were here, I was asking people like, do you want to help me when I'm feeling like I can't do this anymore? And people are jumping alongside of you with this, and explain that, just running Iowa and building a community around what you have right there and how that's blessed you,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's nowhere else that we can build community than where we are. And so, that the world would teach us that the grass is greener somewhere else, but the reality is it's green where you water it. And
I know.
So I'm doing my best to water in my community, build relationships. Most of my relationships are not people in the church. It's something else that's drawn us together, whether it's a topic or a club or running or whatever it is. But again, we're whole people, we're holistic people. And so my faith comes with me into those spaces. And it's not like I'm, standing on a soapbox preaching a sermon, but it's the way that I treat people. It's the way that I treat myself. And people notice. And so as you get to know people and they get to know you, sometimes those conversations open and you can share a little more deeply. But to me, that's how I was mentored and discipled. And people would just, as they were going, kind of as the scriptures tell us, as you were going, make disciples. As people were going, they would say, hey, you want to come with me and do this? I mean, Adam, right? I'm going to run 100 miles. I'm coming through Pratt where you live. Do you want to just run for 10 miles with me? Sure. He's like, I'm only going to be going 14 minutes per mile or whatever. You can do that. So, and he was very strategic about it. It came across in this way of you're doing something for me that's helpful to me, but in the long run, it was way more helpful to me to have that time with him and to have him speak truth into my life. And so I'm just trying to do what people did for me.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of have the same thoughts about those who have ran before me physically, spiritually. The things I have learned from them is creating and shaping the person that I'm becoming. I remember Adam asking me, he's like, yeah, I'm doing Run for Missions and need some people to run alongside of me and help me, would you be willing? And I was like, yeah. And I told him, I said, well, I'm running the half marathon for the Run for Missions. He goes, oh, you'll be fine. You run that and then run with me the next day for the 100 miles. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can do that. And he looked at me and I'll never forget him saying, Donnie, you're one of the fastest runners I've ever known at your age. Like you're really fast for your age. And he said, you just need to slow down, bro. He's like, if you run 12-minute miles, you can run forever. And he helped me with that mind shift,
Yeah.
And where I learned that wasn't to try to run 12-minute miles. It was actually to run more with Adam, And the more I ran with Adam, the more I realized how to pace myself, and realized that I could go further when I'm actually with somebody else, when we're talking, when we're conversing on the road and the trail. And I see that with what you're doing in Oskaloosa. You're making the best of what you have and what God has given you, and you're turning it into a ministry on your feet, but also in spiritual spaces, in churches, and it's really, really fun to watch. So, do you have a scripture passage or something you've been reading recently that's just maybe hit you real hard, or something that you're landing on over and over?
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading a lot of stuff. We're getting ready for a conference right now, so I've been doing a lot of study for that. But I mean, just honestly, even the last 3 weeks since we were together, I pulled that James K.A. Smith book back out because I'd forgotten how profound just the idea that, the things that we do or don't do, do things to us. And to me, that's probably worth the price of admission. To this episode or whatever. There's no benign activity in our lives.
Yeah.
And so,
you can't live in neutral.
If you have a goal or a purpose or something that you're striving toward, you have to put in the work. Dallas Willard, right? Grace isn't opposed to earning. Grace isn't opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning. We can't earn it, but there's work involved.
Yeah.
And so, that's true whether we're talking about our running or our career or our education, and especially true in our discipleship. And so I think that's probably the thing that I would leave people with.
Yeah. I got to get that book. One I've been reading is they call it the spiritual version of James Clear, his book Atomic Habits, and it's Justin Early, The Common Rule. I think I might have told you about that when you were here, and it's basically the spiritual version of that. That's exactly it. And using our rhythms and our practices to shape us and helping define our days and what we do with our days. And so, yeah, I'm amazed by the information that's out there. What was the book you were just talking about?
It's called You Are What You Love, The Spiritual Power of Habit.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'm going to have to look into that for sure. But let me pull up a scripture that we can look at for this episode. And I'll delete some of this out of here, this space in between. What's next up for you right now? Like coming up on ministry stuff, these conversations.
I'm going tonight to one of my churches to meet with their elders, and I think they opened it up to anybody that wanted to come about our strategic plan proposal. And then Saturday we have our third virtual Q&A for that. And yeah, I mean that's mostly what I'm navigating right now. Is just we've learned about a little more resistance than we were anticipating with a couple of churches, and so just first processing that because it kind of surprised me, and then just. I remind our elders, and it's mostly for me to, it's easy to get frustrated with that or discouraged, but really it's an opportunity for us to be pastoral with these people, and they're not our adversaries. These are people that we love. And so how do we journey together through hard conversations? So that's reminding myself of that and then modeling it so the rest of our elders did as well.
Yeah, I'm reminded. So as we begin I always do this Selah moment, scripture, especially in the Psalms where the word Selah shows up, it just means to pause, to reflect. And every time I do a podcast, I don't want to miss this moment to just say, okay, like, let's slow down the conversation, breathe a little bit of what we've been talking about. And how do we turn that maybe even into like a prayer? And as I think about it, I think about this conversation, I think about Ecclesiastes 3, and I think about Solomon's words when he's basically saying, I work and I toil, and I'm like, what do I have to gain for the work that I've actually done? And I think that's a question that we often ask too, is like, man, I just worked so hard this week. What did I accomplish? What did I do? What have I gained out of all of that? And I think when we find ourselves putting ourselves in positions of running or going on a walk, a bike ride, or anything like that, that kind of feeds our soul in a way that work itself doesn't, but it's still work, right? I think we can reflect on this passage where he says, he's made everything beautiful in his time. He's set eternity in the human heart. And yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to end. It's almost like he's saying, you're not going to find your purpose by doing more. You're going to find your purpose by doing less things that cause you to feel like you've accomplished something or whatever it is. There's tension that we all live with in that. I do every single day, that God has placed eternity in my heart, yet we still live within this time frame. We live within, like we talked about, limits, and we are limited beings, and we find ourselves being limited by our creatureliness, our humanness. And we long for those moments where we can experience something that's eternal, that because of it, we have to sleep, we have to find new strength, we have to figure out what we're going to do when we grow tired. We seek certainty in so many things, yet we have to walk by faith, and that's crazy. So as I think about that, perhaps spiritual maturity itself is not escaping that tension. It's actually using it as a way of moving forward. How do we live faithfully in it? How do we receive both of those in the sense that as a gift of eternity, but also a gift of our own humanity? So I'm going to just use this as a prayer really quick, and we'll just take a moment to kind of breathe in that prayer and then exhale that prayer a little bit as just kind of a practice, like we're running. We're breathing in, we're exhaling, breathing, exhaling. Our heart is racing, and yet we're doing something really good for us. Same as with prayer. We're breathing in these words, we're exhaling them. So we'll take a moment to do that. We'll bow our heads and take a moment here. Ecclesiastes 3 as a prayer. God, you've made everything beautiful in its time, yet you've set eternity in our hearts. You've made everything beautiful in this time here, And we pray that you have set eternity, not only in our hearts, but those who are listening. May we come out of this with this idea that we cannot fathom really what you did from the start in our life or what you're going to do at the end, but that you are faithful to us. That in everything we do, eating, drinking, sleeping, rising, walking, working, it's all made beautiful because of you, not because of us. So may we not find our worth or value in things like a Strava account, but find our worth and value in every single heartbeat that we experience, in every breath on the trail, but everything that we do in our marriages, our families, our work environment, our leadership, everything that we do. May it all be glorifying to you in every single way. I thank you. Thank you for Manny. I thank you for his friendship to me, his profound leadership. I thank you that he's a student of your word. He's a student of your spirit, but he is also a student of what you're speaking to him in his body and his life, and that he believes, and I know this, Lord, that he believes he is an embodied reality of who you are on this earth, and that is to be given as a gift to others more than just as a gift to himself. And bless him in that work. Bless him in this time coming up, in these meetings. And we pray for his training as he is embarking on this 50-miler and also this 100-miler. And I just ask God that you would speak to him on the trail and the miles that he runs. May you shape him into a person that he would be excited to see when he gets across that finish line. We praise you and thank you for his family, his life, and all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Manny, it's so good to have you hanging out. Hopefully this was good for you. You need to start a podcast, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, we're working on it.
I think you got some really, I stuck you with some tough questions, man. You know,
and
good.
It was a good time.
It was really good. So really appreciate your friendship and times we've got to run, and look forward to many more days ahead of trying to build this thing called a friends movement for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
We can do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, and glad it finally worked out at schedules. And I got to get you out here to Iowa one of these days.
I will. Yeah, keep posting porch pictures. I might just show up because
there you go.
Man, it looks.
Last night was perfect. Last night,
that town is
it's great.
It's sort of picturesque. It looks like something out of a storybook.
I had a buddy of mine come last year to do a workshop at our conference, and he goes, "You didn't tell me you lived in Stars Hollow," which, if you don't know, that's the Gilmore Girls town.
Yeah.
And he just, he texts me like every other week and's like, anything going on in the town square? Because we have it really is a Hallmark
love that
movie.
Town Square.
We have a little band that plays every Thursday night through the summer for over 100 years, and city band, and it's wild.
It's Mayberry.
It's a little bit of Mayberry, a little bit of Stars Hollow.
Yeah. Man, so good. Well, I appreciate your time, and thanks for hanging out with me. And guys, listen, if this has done you some good, I would just love it if you like and follow and send it to a friend. If this has helped you, it's probably not supposed to terminate on you. It's supposed to actually extend beyond you. So send it to somebody else. You can follow Manny on Manny Runs on TikTok. Do you have an Instagram too? Yeah. Yeah,
it's just Manny Garcia on Instagram.
Yeah. So follow Manny, follow with this race that's coming up and his runs and all this stuff that's happening with him in his life. He's a good guy to follow. You'll learn a lot, and grateful for the viewership and those that are listening, and look forward to many more of these ahead. We'll talk to you guys soon. Have a great week. There it is.